And now we have reached the concluding segment of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitle Talkin' Liberty. It's when we invite our regular contributor and constitutional lawyer and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza into the studio to talk liberty. Hello, Scott.
For everyone's favorite portion of the program. Hello,
yes,
Tim.
Yes, it is your favorite portion of the program. I won't reveal my choice for favorite segment in the interest of discretion.
Yes.
A lot of Supreme Court stuff today. First of all, a bill in the legislature, otherwise known as Congress, specifically the Judiciary Committee, would require the Supreme Court to allow cameras in the courtroom. This is a significant issue.
It's really surprising that they would press on this, Tim, having gone through the Kavanaugh hearings,
right,
I think. Now, when Chuck Grassley was chairman of the committee in previous years, he sponsored this bill. He's now no longer on the committee, but he's a co-sponsor. It's now being brought by Dick Durbin, who is on that committee, along with a couple of the Democrat presidential aspirants who are also on that committee, Amy Klobuchar and I don't know if it's
Cory
Spartacus.
Booker.
Spartacus,
right. Yes, Spartacus.
Or one of the
Spartacus
other ones.
No,
it's Blumenthal. Excuse me, it's the fake Vietnam vet. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah. What do they call him? Da Nang Dick.
Oh, right.
Da Nang Dick. That's Trump's nickname for the stolen valor.
And I think that this is interesting on a number of angles. First of all, having seen the protests' disruption of the televised hearings for Kavanaugh's confirmation, I can't understand why somebody would think it would be a good idea to require televising the Supreme Court. We know that these politicians play to the cameras on C-SPAN all the time, and we can only assume, and I mean, history just tells us every single time that this happens, people will play to the cameras. So the justices then will have to play to the cameras, the advocates will play to the cameras, and the audience members will play to the cameras. I think it seems like a disaster. And then there's another angle, which I think is also interesting, which is how does the Congress get off deciding what can and cannot go on in the United States Supreme Court? Aren't they a co-equal branch of government? The U.S. Constitution, Tim, delineates what the rules there are for the Supreme Court.
More specifically, they're a separate branch of government over which the Congress does not have control other than to consider and ultimately confirm candidates to federal courts, including the Supreme Court.
That's part of the checks and balances, but they are co-equal. And just like the Supreme Court can't say to the Congress how they run their house, they could rule on laws that they pass, but not the internal operations of the Congress. There's no doesn't seem to me that this would pass constitutional muster. Would be curious to see if it were passed and Chief Justice Roberts, who leads that branch of government, decided he didn't want those cameras in. That would put a constitutional crisis up, depending on how the executive function then would weigh in.
I can't imagine any of those Supreme Court justices would want their work being televised, essentially.
Well, Tim, there's another aspect of that, actually, which is they can now go down to the Piggly Wiggly and buy a carton of eggs, most of them, without being harassed as either baby killers or the opposite or whatever.
Right.
Whatever giant contentious
those days
issues
would end. That would end.
They would end in a nanosecond. And while these people are compensated relatively handsomely compared to the median income, they're not compensated to a level where they can buy giant estates removed from civilization and have fleets of, phalanx of guards. I mean, they want to live, they live relatively normal lives, these people, and I'm sure they want to continue to do so.
Scott, I get the sense that somewhere Lance Ito is either smiling or frowning, the famous judge from the O.J. case who played to the cameras to a degree that we never saw before and haven't seen since. Okay, still on the Supreme Court, mandatory detention of criminal aliens, according to the court, is constitutional.
What happened is Trump, with an aggressive anti-illegal immigrant push, what they've done is there have been people who were here in the country illegally. They were arrested for a criminal charge and then let go. And then there was no follow-up by immigration authorities because there was lax or no enforcement of that. In an effort to clean that up, now the authorities are going back and saying, boom, we're nabbing you because you have this arrest for X, Y, and Z. In the case of Moni Priap. It was a prior marijuana possession arrest that got him into trouble. And they just basically arrest you and throw you into the clink without sort of the right to any probable, sort of initial hearing, right? And that's what this case is about. The Supreme Court ruled these types of aliens do come into that classification. Mm-hmm. And what this means, and this is a win for the administration's attempt to increase enforcement of our immigration laws, and this is a loss for the people who are on the other side of that, who want lax enforcement. Now, whether sort of liberty has won or lost, my analysis is going to have to wait for another day when I have a little bit more time to digest the opinion. But I can tell you that the dissent, which was from the left bank of the court, focused more on a conservative sort of values proposition in the dissent. In other words, they were saying language that typically comes from the right, that the plain meaning of the statute was not honored with this type of enforcement.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, hosted by our managing editor, Mark Angelides, available to you on demand online at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.